So let's jump right in here. I have some better looking XML. And what we're doing is we hit import QB customers. I set this for, we're going to be retrieving all of the customers from this QuickBooks. And we're going to be doing it 2 at a time, for example. This is what's called an Iterator query. You're going to be doing these a lot. And okay, so I did this. I'm going to hit this again. Just come on. I'm going to create a new thing, a new row in the queue. So I make a queue that looks like this again, and I went over that. This query handler is the method in my code that's going to be handling the response coming in. I do some stuff here in the query params that you don't really need to pay attention to if you're not. You could do something similar or do something else. It's just a bit of a convenience thing I came up with. But this is going to help kick off this Iterator query. Now let's look what happens exactly when we go here. We hit update selected. It's going to go running through here. And let's look at what happens. I'm in the log code now. So the QB, the first request we're creating in this queue row is this. Okay, this is the customer query. Needs to look like this. Right there. Need to have there's an attribute here on the main. Mostly you're just going to say continue on air. I've talked a little bit about QBXML. I use encoding of ASCII. You're going to be using version 13. Okay, you'll see all this. To start off the query, it's this. Here are the nodes that define the query parameters. Like, you're going to get all the customers that have been modified since 1994. The max returned is 2, so you're going to be getting 2 back at a time. And just like you're doing pagination, right? 100 at a time. You're looking at 100 results at a time. This is what Iterator query is like. You got to keep this owner ID stuff in there. I have no idea, but it has to be in there. Okay, so what happens is the first query goes in. This is now the response here. You get back. And to go to the code we're in the code here. Receive response action in your SOAP action. Send request came in, comes back like this. That's what we're looking at. In my particular case, what I do in this library here is the params response that's the pure XML string. I'm just kind of putting that in. I'm taking off the first two root nodes that are found here. When I say I strip these 2 nodes off because all the nodes you care about are this in a response. So that's the whole thing that I'm calling base. And I'm just putting it into a Ruby library that handles XML. It's called Nokogiri. You have one similar. It's making an object here. The base is basically an object. It's not an error, so it goes to this condition. It's not this. This is mod. We'll get into that later. But it is this because that's an attribute over there. If you see the Iterator ID, that's going to be an attribute, so that's going to be successful. So now we're in here. So in my code, we're going to go over here now. I'm going to do a class response iterator. Okay? Response iterator looks like this. You send in the current job, the base XML, and going to log. And then we're going to run a method off of that class called process. Let's look at that. And I'm not going to do too much on my library here because it doesn't totally matter. You can see it as a pattern again, but where am I? Let's see. We're in query handler, response iterator. Okay, here I am. So here we are in process. All right, the first thing I do when we process, I'm going to grab this remaining count thing, attribute. That's right here. See that over there, 47. Going to pick that off. I'm also going to pick off the Iterator ID, and you'll see why that's important. So I need to take the Iterator ID out of here because when we make our next query, we got to stick that iterator on there so it knows to get the next 2 customers. But more on that in a bit. I'm going to save this iterator ID to my queue. Okay, I don't want to go into that too much because that's sort of like a little bit of inside baseball. But here, I'm going to save this iterator because that's how I'm going to construct my next query. You may or may not do that. So let's not spend too much time on that. Now I'm going to process this response XML. I got the 2 customers back. I need to put them into my system, figure out whether existing customers in my system, I need to make new ones. So a little bit on that is, so the current job again is the queue. So now I'm back over to this code, is the queue, which is like my model code. It's off the database, and that's over here, and it processes the query. So see, I'm just kind of going around. Now I'm going back. I'm going and making a query handler instance class, which is back over here. So this is basically just how I handle queries. You know, you make a query, you want stuff from QuickBooks, invoices, and then you need to do something in your system with them. So you want to put that in your own, its own area. Now, what happens here is, this is just Ruby. What this .send means is that I can put in just a string here, and it's going to run this as a method. And why I do that is it's just a flexibility thing, because whatever on these query actions, I can put whatever method I come up with and stick it in my code, and it'll go run it. So it's a way of giving you that dynamic flexibility of running a dynamic method. So I'm going to be taking these customers, importing them in, and I just want to have my designate my code. Now what makes this confusing is this: if we go look at query handler, there is no method called import customers. That's in my actual, remember this is a library I'm going off of. In my actual app, so I'm here in the actual app now, and not the library, okay? And I'm basically just overriding query handler in my library, and I'll show you what I mean there. I'm not going to go over this too much because this is not the critical things you need to know, but I at least want to explain the code, because this is going to help you go back. You're going to get access again to GitHub, and this will help you kind of rejar and write your own stuff. Or if you're using Ruby, then this will be more relevant. But anyway, I'm in my app code now, because that's the spec dummy that you see down on the bottom of the screen. Spec dummy is the actual app here again. This is the app I'm running right now. And I'm basically bringing in the library code, and I'm overriding. So, and then I can add methods there. So here's import customers, to make a long story short. Here I'm back to the XML. So finally, let's go back to the XML. And let's open that up a bit. So customer return is the XML node here. All right, simple enough. And that's the first returned customer. So that's why, you know, we're looping through this each, and we're gonna grab their attributes, their full name, and blah blah blah. I'll go into customers later, but just want to show what the code is doing and what we're being returned back. So here we go, Jane Doe, and I'm grabbing the list ID, the full name, things like that. But we got to keep moving here and keep explaining. So why did we save the iterator ID and things like that? Let's now look at the next bit of code. So in my library, I'm basically looping back and forth on this same queue thing. That's what's built into my library. So I'm going to save the iterator ID here, and I don't actually process this as true right now. This stays false. And what happens is I keep looping back and forth, staying on my query. Now, you can decide to do those kinds of things in your queue or not. I think it's a pretty good way to do it and keep the queue as the main source of things going on. And I'm just not closing this out until, let's go into that code. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm not going to mark this job is done. We're going to keep on looping back and forth. So when the QuickBooks Web Connector is done with this receive response, goes through its next steps, you're sending back a 99 here because we're not done yet, because the remaining we're not remaining we're not done yet, right? Because when the remaining is greater than 0, we're going to send back a progress of 99, which is going to make the QuickBooks Web Connector loop back to send request up there in line 66. Okay? When that happens, you generate another query again. And it's going to be just like, let's go, I was going to go up there. Let me go down here now and look at the next query. So now you need to construct a query like this. So you need to, in your send request XML, okay, so we're back here, making XML to, because the QuickBooks Web Connector is still open because you send back a progress 99. So it's going to hit send request again and make XML. You need to make this XML here, right here. And what you need to include is that iterator ID from above. So it goes to the next. Let's just say you got number 1 and number 2 on the first one. Now it needs to know that you want the query again, but this is an iterator query. Now 3 and 4 need to be sent to you. Do you understand? So you basically need to make it say iterator continue and the iterator ID. And you're going to loop back and forth in this process. We're going to go and we're going to get another batch, okay, of, here it is here. Okay, now I got another one here. Oh, oops, that's not the return. Here's the return here. Here's the receive response for that last one we were talking about. Okay. Now we're down to 46 iterator remaining count. Okay, so we're going to record that. We're not done yet. We're going to keep the queue going. We're going to keep the web connector going by sending back a progress on 99. We're going to record the iterator ID here and then construct the next send request with that iterator ID. And we're going to keep on going into a loop until we get a remaining of 0. Then you can shut it off and finish this particular queue action. You might have another one, but you can see that, and don't think you can return a lot of, you could set it pretty high to start. I don't know, I think I do like, if in real world, I do like 25. I know you can't do too many because the thing will time out. So you have to do iterator IDs. You only have a 2-minute window for each individual queue item. And if it doesn't finish processing, the thing will time out. And the QuickBooks Web, and you won't get all your customers. So you have to use iterator queries. And I know they're kind of a pain. But once you get a system, either using this library or you're making your own library, you got it baked into your code, you'll see that no big deal because it's all baked in and all happening automatic. Okay, so we're going to end that. That's going to be an important video. You might need to watch that multiple times and things. But that is the basics of doing iterator queries.